This is not a normal podcast. Look around. We're on an island in the James River in downtown Richmond. Sharps Island, it's called. People camp here, fish here, party here. For over 200 years, Richmonders have built structures on this island. Inevitably, those structures were washed away, but the Richmonders, like myself, keep coming back, keep building, trying to gain a foothold. Why? For us, the water that surrounds Sharps Island isn't a barrier, it's a threshold, a doorway to a magical place. This acre of rock and sand surrounded by the city, yet somehow completely secluded. On this podcast, our guests have to get in a boat and leave the world behind. I hope you'll come with them. The big ones for fishermen and for all these fish are the like shad, herring, alewife. A lot of times the stripers are too big for certainly not too big for a osprey, but too big for a blue heron. All right, hold on a sec. I'm gonna try and turn us. It gets a little shallow here. All right, go ahead, keep going. All right, keep going. Look at that. Boom. It wasn't bad. Sometimes that's perfect. Sometimes the sand is like super soft. Claire, Tim, good to meet you. See you again.
Good to see you.
Welcome back.
Good to be back.
Second time on Sharps. Here, let me show you this real quick though, because I showed Brendan. I don't know if Brendan and one of his co-workers, they loved it.
Holy moly, look
So,
at that now.
do you remember, and I should have brought the pictures. I've done more research I want to tell you about. Do you remember I was telling you about the references to it was described as a Lilliputian steamer that was moored here, and there was multiple references to it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it, and we think this is like these timbers are not random.
No.
You know what I mean? And they're too low, and there's more. But basically, that's what he thinks. And we were wondering if you remember this hunk of granite that we didn't know how it got here or what its purpose was, but it has it almost looks like where you'd tie up a horse.
Yes.
We were wondering, we were all sort of debating whether that was part of the mooring for it, because how does that wash? The thing's got to be 800 pounds at least, right? That's just not coming down the James River.
No, that falls.
Right, exactly. So, and then you get into all the fun of how in the world did these guys get this stuff over here in 1850? You know what I mean? So anyway, but at low tide, that becomes I love seeing that thing, because you're holy crap, think about this place. All right, it's a beautiful day here in Richmond. We're back out in the middle of the James River for another edition of the Sharps Island podcast. Today we have Tim Roberts with us. Tim is a professional archaeologist, formerly with the State Department of Historic Resources. I have that right?
Virginia.
And now Virginia Department of Historic Resources, and now with your own company, Black Star Cultural Resources. I have a lot of questions about Richmond and how it's sort of, what's underneath us, how it got looking this way. I want to dig into some sort of classic RVA mysteries, right? But first, give me the sort of thumbnail bio, your thumbnail bio. How did you end up in Richmond? How did you end up a professional archaeologist in Richmond, Virginia?
Whew. So I've been doing archaeology professionally for more than 20 years.
Okay.
Graduated from Florida State University in 2003.
Okay.
Went up to University of Wisconsin for graduate school.
Right.
Did a lot of traveling after that as a shovel bum, which is what a lot of sort of archaeologists do. That's how we get into the field. Right. So I did that for about 2 years, no address, no car, as a matter of fact.
Next job.
Yeah.
Just on to the next job.
Yeah,
right?
I had a Nokia cell phone, I think, and a $40 a month storage unit, and that was my overhead.
Literally.
Literally.
That's amazing.
Did that for a while. Ended up working for a company in Houston doing CRM, cultural resource management, archaeology, especially energy exploration and development stuff, pipelines and things like that. Yeah, man, and it'll burn you out.
Really?
It's hard work.
Right.
It pays.
Right.
But I was in the field constantly, and totally drained.
Down in Texas.
Mostly in Texas. Texas. With this company, Texas, Louisiana, A little bit of stuff in Arkansas, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Keystone XL pipeline, for example. If
Oh,
you remember
wow.
that one, that was one of the
Yeah.
ones that we did a lot of work on. And ended up leaving Houston, going back to Tallahassee,
Okay.
working for the Southeast Archaeological Center, National Park Service unit down there.
That's part of the NPS.
That's part of NPS. Yeah. One of the few. It was, I guess you could say, temporary. We'll say temporarily was.
Okay.
Soon to be is again. I pray and hope for.
Okay.
But so a support system for, and in this case for all NPS units throughout the southeastern United States.
So for like archaeological or cultural resource projects throughout the national parks.
Archaeology specifically, from Virgin
Okay.
Islands, St. Croix, all the way over to Brownsville, Texas, and up the Blue Ridge Parkway. And the Blue Ridge Parkway archaeological overview and assessment that I worked on was really my first time in Virginia.
Okay.
And went all the way up. We did I got some stories about that, man.
Really?
We did some, we saw some amazing sites and just had some, because you're off trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did a lot of cool work. And so, I was with NPS, and when the 45th president of the United States was elected,
Right.
Was president-elect at the time, I had what was called a term position, so it was sort of guaranteed for 4 years, then I could be rehired. It was
Right.
just kind of the way things were structured with the units like that. And with the new president coming in, he had made a promise, I'm going to freeze federal hiring.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's definitely going to happen.
This
And he did. And I had seen the writing on the wall, so I started looking for positions.
Okay.
And a woman that I had worked with there at MPS was up in Richmond working
Okay.
for a company. So I applied.
A private company.
A private company,
Yeah.
cultural resource analysts.
Okay.
And they hired me. And it was funny, my second interview, Kay Simpson was the director. In my second interview, she said, Tim, don't worry. It's not like the first day that you get up here, they're going to be like, oh, it's the new Kay. And I'm like, why would they say that? I'm a staff archaeologist.
Right.
Like she hired me to replace her. So about 6 months into the position, I was kind of transitioning into director of operations for them.
Okay.
Which was awesome. I mean, it was like a big step professionally in my career. I went from like digging holes and eating sandy sandwiches to like
Right.
going to networking events at Richmond breweries
yeah,
and
yeah.
flirting my way into work.
Right.
And so on. And it was really fun, to be honest.
Okay.
But I wanted to get back into public sector work.
Okay.
And then that's when
The work itself wasn't as rewarding.
there were a lot of reasons that I left,
Right.
and what really kept me there, I think, longer was the responsibility I felt for the people that worked under me.
Yeah.
I mean, I expanded the office, expanded the client base,
Right.
and hired new employees, and I was like afraid,
Yeah.
rightfully so, that if I was like, listen, I'm moving on to something else,
Right.
they might close the office, and then those folks would be out of work.
Right.
And so I kind of put it off for a year, but then a position at DHR opened up in project review, just
Okay.
like the legal side in a way.
Yeah.
We're not lawyers, but it's like federally regulated projects,
Right.
which are the reason most archaeology is done in the U.S. That requires review at the state level.
Right.
And so, in fact, I was just there the other day for an interview for folks, somebody else applying for that job, the job that I had. Did project review for a little while, and then they created a position called community outreach coordinator,
Right.
which was like my dream job.
Okay.
I mean, it was basically engaging with particularly African American community to identify historic sites.
Right.
Didn't have to be significant in the National Register of Historic Places,
Right.
context, but to basically get these things into the state's database.
Okay.
And through that engagement, that's kind of how I started to sort of feel this calling to just kind of go out on my own.
Do it on your own. Yeah.
Yeah. And it came down to the fact that folks would occasionally call, and sometimes I would just get copied on like an email or something like
Right.
that, where they'd be asking, such and such, the city of Richmond, for example, in a
Yeah.
particular case, planning department, to consult with, Tim Roberts, archaeologist, community outreach, such and such and such
Right.
at DHR, on things that were totally outside of the state's jurisdiction.
Okay.
Like that it wouldn't have been just like a conflict of interest, it was like disallowed,
Yeah.
to kind of
Okay.
advocate, right?
So that led you to going and starting Black Star.
I had to.
Yeah.
I had to.
Right.
I was like, I'm gonna be like the Batman of archaeology
Right.
in Richmond.
Nice.
And,
Yeah.
and to some extent, it's been going that way.
Right.
somebody told me, in fact, it was Devon Henry from Team Henry Enterprises.
Okay.
I met him out on site with the Jackson Project at the Skipwith Roper. They call it the Skipwith Roper Homecoming Project. It's out in Jackson Ward.
Okay.
Just on the directly south of Shockoe Hill Cemetery.
Right.
Not Shockoe Hill African Burying Ground, although that's right there too.
Yeah, Shockoe Hill is right. The interstate goes right by it, right?
Yeah, the one that looks like a cemetery.
Yes. It's a real cemetery.
It's a massive, very old real cemetery.
Yeah.
And I was out there on site with Jackson Project because Sisha, Moon, and Anjali were, were considerate of the archaeological potential of the landscape and, wanted to consult. Wasn't a federal project. Like I said, there was no regulatory responsibility for them to do so.
Right.
But they did. So I was out there. Devon was out there. And Team Henry, that's the company that took down the monuments.
Okay.
So
Got it.
Claim to fame. They're doing a lot of great work since then.
Yeah.
And I remember, I was still with the state at the time. And I was like, yeah, I've been thinking about, starting my own LLC, and great guy to talk to about it. I mean, I just kind of brought it up in passing, like, oh, I'd love to do this work, but, I'm just here providing technical assistance on behalf of the state.
Right.
And he said to me, and I wish that I had, fully digested this.
Right.
He was like, man, you are in a real niche. He's like, because you're kind of a doer seller.
Right.
And he's like, you got to know how to say no. He's like, because as soon as, he didn't use these terms yet, but he's like, as soon as you hang out your shingle, as they say, you're going to be flooded with work.
Okay.
And you got to learn how to say no. And I did not learn.
Yeah.
And it's been 2.5 years.
Any small business owner who starts a business, you're like, yeah, come on.
And it's niche, dude.
Right.
It's not, not to say that there isn't competition, but I've been really lucky in the fact that the work that I've done since starting Black Star, I've not competed for.
Yeah.
They haven't been bidded projects.
One job leads
out
to
for
the next,
regulatory review.
Next.
I mean,
word of mouth.
Folks have reached out to me direct. Cold called me and said, "Hey, we'd love to talk to you about James River Association."
Yeah, I want to talk about some of these projects because that's how I met you, was through the James River Association. Back in the fall, I wrote an article in the Richmonder about your work for the James River the Friends of the James River Park on Belle Isle. And obviously the thing I loved about it was that, everyone in Richmond knows Belle Isle.
Sure.
Most people have been to Belle Isle, and yet we spent time doing things that nobody's done on Belle Isle, or very few people have done on Belle Isle, right?
Yeah.
It was an archaeological project. I want to give the listeners sort of an overview of what you were doing out there and what the Friends were trying to do out there.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I don't know how many people, know that kind of work takes place out there or has taken place there.
What I am working on is what we call an archaeological assessment of the island, which is essentially to try to gain an understanding of the potential for archaeological sites to be preserved. Right, and also what kinds of sites may be preserved, their character, that sort of thing. Even not even talking about, again, the National Register significance and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So, it was really that question of what all is out here. Almost no professional work has gone on.
Which is crazy to me because and as a place of history, right? I'm sure most people think of Belle Isle. Obviously now it's recreation, and they think of it as a Civil War, an infamous prison camp in the Civil War. But one of the things I learned from listening to you and Josh, the Friends of the James River Park's executive director, was all the different layers of history out there.
Oh, man.
Industrial history, more recently, really the whole time, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Tons of industrial history out there. What was some of the industrial work going on out there? After the Civil War?
After the Civil War?
Or both? Before?
Before, even in the... certainly by the very early 1800s, there was a nailery out there. So John Harvey...
Making nails.
Yeah, making nails.
Right.
Maybe we underestimate the importance of the lowly nail.
Right.
But look around.
Yeah, exactly.
Joinery is no easy task.
Right.
A guy named John Harvey, and then after he died, it was kind of taken over by his son and daughter.
Right.
John Harvey actually just came up recently in some research I was doing on the University of Richmond Burying Ground, another project. But even beyond the industrial history, though, and the layers going on Belle Isle, I just want to say, you talk about a place of history.
Right.
That's like what Richmond is.
Yeah.
And so, when you look around the city and you consider sort of, how we celebrate it.
Right.
But how little, all things considered, especially archaeological research has been done. It's important, I think, that we don't take for granted that just because something is recognized as a historical place and so on and so forth, that people are doing like the deep dives to try to, identify, evaluate it, expose, understand, and really elevate and celebrate this stuff.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of industrial work. In fact, so some of the testing I'd done on Belle Isle before you and I met up out there was down where, so anybody that's been there, they've seen like the old roller mill and the various...
which is the big brick, the brick ruins that's like kind of right there in the middle of the island.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Right where a bunch of trails come past.
But yes, definitely. A bunch of trails come past, beautiful big brick facade, massive piles of brick. And like, in fact, like standing pieces of wall and other kind of intact bits of other structures that were there.
Cool site.
Oh yeah. So kind of near there and near the power plant, particularly right by the power plant.
Yeah.
Sort of projected historic maps showing the location of the Harvey Mill.
The nailery.
Yeah. It's a water powered operation.
Yeah.
So,
which is why it was out there, right? Like in the early 1800s, I'm assuming you're making nails on an island because you want to use the water that's flowing past.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and the land was available.
Right.
Because, I mean, along the banks of the James, especially on the North Bank, you've got massive, the big milling industry is starting up, tobacco warehouses and all that, tobacco factories and so on. What's cool, too, down there is, like, besides the artifacts and what's buried, because it's not just artifacts that are buried. I mean, I'm talking archaeological features, buried architecture, buried surfaces that have just been burned, from fires and industrial operations. But they're landscape features that I think are easy to miss, in part because, it's really densely vegetated. But when you're there looking at it, especially from the right vantage, it's like, oh man, this is the tail race from the Harvey Mill.
Right.
And it just seems like a depression, but when you're standing right there, it's like, is this a road? Is this a path? Is just this some kind of grassy ditch? No. Like, this is an intentionally constructed, industrial water conduit. It's not made from flooding.
Right.
This is something that's really there. And that's what's, I think, so awesome about Belle Isle, is that everywhere you go, literally from top to bottom, upriver to downriver, there are these landscape features on the surface that you can see that are associated with hundreds of years of human use and history on the island.
Well, one of the things that I found really cool about that sort of experience is the way you have to start in seeing those features as different. Like now you might be like, oh yeah, my kid plays on the pump track, but to you're like, yeah, but look at that right there, like you're on top of the tail race, right?
Totally.
And so thinking about like where we were digging was at the very top of Belle Isle, and I loved like the things you could deduce or try to imagine the way people were using that landscape 300, 200 years ago. Like, all right, we go to the top of the island, well, we're not in the floodplain anymore, so it's much more likely that these kind of uses were common. Let's see if we can find evidence, right? I mean, that was part of the idea. And I love, like, when you start doing that, you can't not see the landscape that way.
Man, that's the best part.
Yeah.
I think that's the best part with any kind of, kind of, especially tangible, historical, point of reference or viewpoint.
Right.
I mean, when I was at DHR, I started getting into architectural history.
Right.
Because you have to, and it's fascinating.
Right.
And it's like, as soon as you learn what a pilaster is, you're seeing them everywhere. Which are like, those are like rather than a standalone column, it's like when you have a wall, for example, and there's like this half column that comes out. It's like a pilaster. Even just learning.
And they're super common.
I mean, it's a common, architectural design element. It's decorative, and it tells a story about when something was built, what style somebody was interested in, what was interested in, and was it popular at that time. Okay, now we can maybe date this and start kind of putting together a narrative, an authentic narrative that helps bring this landscape into focus.
Yeah, the layers on Belle Isle are amazing. And because as you were saying that day, there's no way American Indians obviously didn't use this island before white people ever showed up, right? So what kind of uses would they have? Well, it was probably this sort of like fish, right? Like processing and fishing is certainly used for that reason, right?
I mean, it's so hard to get into like the psychology of ancient peoples.
Yeah.
Right. I think like through more like really mindful engagement with like Native American communities today.
Right.
I think we can. Not
right.
to say like direct proxy or whatever, but I mean that.
Yeah, you start to imagine.
But that's insight.
So all right, so to that point, I think there's another project you worked on, a place called Ham Cemetery, that in some ways I think about as like it's the opposite of Belle Isle, in that nobody knows about it in Richmond, and I think it's so cool and so instructive in how we think about the landscape, right? Like so, Ham Cemetery. There was an article by Laura Andersley in Richmond Magazine last year, and she wrote a really cool article highlighting the work done there. And it's literally, if you know where Bandy Field is, right? Like people know Bandy Field maybe, but it's right next to the University of Richmond.
Yep.
And if you don't, you've driven past it a million times on Three Chopped Road.
Yep.
It's kind of right there before the Three Chopped and Patterson.
That's right.
Right? And it's like back in the woods behind Bandy Field. So anyway, I highly recommend people like sort of Google that story from Richmond Magazine. But can you tell us about the archaeological, or give us the thumbnail sketch of like what Ham Cemetery was and the work you did there?
Oh man, so Bandy Field was part of West Ham Plantation.
Right, there's a plantation there,
There's a
which I bet
plantation
people
there.
don't realize.
Yeah, and at the end of between the Green family, Benjamin and Julia Green,
right,
purchased essentially part of West Ham Plantation, but
okay.
What we call West Ham Plantation
around
today.
when?
1855.
In 1850. Okay, 1855. Got it.
Yeah, and so they own it through the end of the Civil War.
Right.
Obviously, they enslaved many people.
Right.
I shouldn't say obviously, but obviously enslaved many people.
It's a plantation.
And like a lot of rich folks in Richmond, property owners, numerous properties, had numerous business interests in the city
right.
and out there, which at the time was pretty rural west, Henrico County,
right.
Western Henrico. So at the end of the Civil War, shortly thereafter, three brothers, Moses, James, and Silas Bradford, purchased about 5 acres from
and these are
the
freed
Greens.
slaves?
These were folks.
At this point?
These were folks who had been enslaved,
okay,
and were free thanks to the 13th Amendment.
Right.
And so they purchased property on the, within the plantation where they had been enslaved,
right.
where their families had been enslaved, and established a community that was called Bandy. That's how folks referred to it, as Bandy.
It was Bandy, okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't, and it was one of, you'll find them on maps sometimes as, they'll be called settlements.
Right.
There's a really great map I was looking at from 1901 that is awesome. I mean, it's got, it's all of Henrico County.
Right.
East and west, north as well.
Right.
And it has, property boundaries and property
right.
owners' names. And I was looking at it just the other day. In fact, I was working on a GIS
right.
map, and found on that map 12 parcels, essentially, that are labeled as settlement.
Okay.
I'm like, oh my gosh,
That's what these are.
There's so many of them, and so and these are pretty much entirely formed by, founded by people who, at least among the founding families, were people
right.
who had been enslaved.
So at Ham specifically, it was obviously there were any number of slaves who passed away while they were still enslaved, right? And there's a cemetery that essentially, that whole area just got overgrown, right? Like it got sort of taken over.
Well, so during the period of enslavement,
right,
Sons and Daughters of Ham Cemetery, as we call it, did not exist.
Yeah.
In fact, it was, at least at the end of the Civil War,
right,
it was a terraced landscape.
Okay.
And I mean, when you go out there today,
going down towards what would be now, like University of Richmond area.
Yeah, going
that way.
Going that
right.
way. So like off the south side of Bandy Field.
Right.
So at the edge of Bandy, and in fact also on the western side, there
right.
are Civil War earthworks, like defensive earthworks from the Confederacy.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That are actually really well preserved.
Wow.
And there's like a covered way,
right.
especially at this one right there by the cemetery.
Yeah.
Which was like, it was a covered way because you could be inside the fortification without getting hit by like rifles
right.
and cannonballs and so on.
Right.
And so I think that as part of those defenses, became the cemetery was terraced. And when you're out there looking at it, like it looks just like this eroding hillside.
Yeah, hillside.
So I'm the secretary for the Friends group, the Friends of Sons and Daughters of Ham Cemetery.
Right.
And our president, her name's Carolyn Moten, was is a descendant of the founding of the Bradfords, in fact, and lived there when she was a little girl until she was probably 9 or 10 years old.
Right.
And then in 1955, the city.
I was gonna say, is that the same Moton, like Farmville, massive? There's a Moton museum.
You know what? That's a good question. Moton's a married name.
Okay. Anyway, I'm just curious because I was just out there. You know, the whole massive resistance, Prince Edward County.
Oh yeah.
There's a Moton museum in Farmville.
Absolutely, I'm familiar.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, I apologize.
Well, no, anyway, yeah. So we're out there, and she's in her 70s, and she's like, we're standing out there, and we're looking at the cemetery, and she's like, it's just so steep and seems so eroded. I just can't believe that anybody's actually still buried here.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not actually that eroded. And in fact, if you're at the bottom, kind of like I was saying about the perspective when you're on Belle Isle, and you can see these mill races, or you can see these rises where, that are essentially building foundations.
Right.
When you're down at the bottom of the slope, at Sons and Daughters of Ham.
Yeah.
And you're looking back up. When you're right by, there's 2 headstones out there that are standing.
Yeah.
One wasn't standing; it's been restood. But the headstone, it's a military headstone for Moses Bradford Jr., who was a United States Buffalo soldier.
Right.
So in
So that's
25th Infantry.
after the Civil War.
That's
right?
That's 1890s.
Spanish-American War. Yeah.
And he was over there.
Okay.
And so when you're down there by that headstone, if you're looking up the hill, you can really see that terracing, and you're like, this is a manufactured landscape.
Right.
I do not believe that it was created for the cemetery.
Yeah.
Although the cemetery does respond, the way it's laid out. There are actually paths and stuff out there. There are little bits of sort of brick piles that are landscape architecture, and it responds to this terracing that's out there. But the giveaway for, in my opinion, as to how the archaeology is telling us that this is not a massively eroded landscape is that, like I said, there's the 2 headstones that are still out there that you can find.
Right.
They're pretty obvious. But it turns out that many of the graves are actually marked with river cobbles that did not erode.
Yeah, there's no river right. It's too high. It's up above the river.
Right. I mean, these were put there by, the survivors of those who, those who were funeralized there, to mark their graves.
And then I read that
on the surface, like there's no way that a round river cobble sitting on the surface and an eroding landscape is not going to just be rolling straight down to the fence of the neighbor at the bottom zone.
So in the 1950s, that land was taken by eminent domain, right, from the ancestors, like those the Moses family, right, and all those people that had sort of settled there. It was taken for what, like a school, City of Richmond? At that point, it was City of Richmond.
Yeah.
They were going to build a school. They didn't build a school. And then it just kind of became forgotten, right? Not forgotten, but like, left to ruin, I guess.
So, I mean, like, this was our last major housing crisis. Right. It was the end of World War II.
Right.
You had all these soldiers coming back. You had, families growing rapidly. You had women in the workforce. Families gaining wealth.
Suburbs were expanding.
100%. And if you look at historic aerials, so the earliest one I've looked at is 1952.
Okay.
The houses for the bandy community are still out there.
Right.
In 1955, when the city comes in to demolish, when this photograph that I was looking at was taken, the houses are still out there. But even in 55, you can see the sprawl beginning.
Interesting.
And it's really interesting, too, in terms of sensitivity to the landscape, which is something I think, like, our city could really learn as we're navigating the challenges of the current housing crisis.
Right.
And just like a kind of a short example, because, what's so wonderful about this cemetery as a historic resource, besides, of course, that it's a sacred site that's being, recognized and elevated and preserved and shared.
Yeah.
Is that, you have the Civil War earthworks there.
Right.
You've got the Reconstruction era Bandy community.
Right.
With archaeology preserved in Bandy Field.
Right.
You have this cemetery, right, spanning the late 19th through into the mid 20th century.
Right.
And then you have this urban renewal history. Right. That's the demolition of the community in 1955.
Right.
And then also this sprawl. So really close. So the area we're talking about, you got Freeman.
Douglas Freeman.
Douglas Freeman High School's right there.
Yeah.
You've got Horse Pen down in the other direction. Skip with
University of Richmond.
Right. So Horse Pen, dead ends over there.
Right.
Monument, hits Horse Pen.
Right.
There's a church right there. If you were to, if Monument, say, were to keep on going, it would go into a community that's there. I call it Fort Hill. I don't actually know what its particular name is. The reason I call it Fort Hill is in part there's a street called Fort Hill.
Right.
So, like those earthworks I was talking about at Bandy, and just north of the cemetery. There's also one on the University of Richmond campus on Prospect Street, which is right there. It's like just on the opposite side of the property boundary of UR and Sons and Daughters of Ham.
Right.
So in this Fort Hale area by Skipwith.
Is that a settlement also?
No. Well, that's kind of interesting you ask, but no.
Yeah.
So at least different story.
Yeah.
No, this is like 1950s construction. So you get all these, World War II affordable homes that are like 800 square foot, 3-bedroom homes, on these beautiful lots. But if you're driving through there, first of all, these streets are just winding around, and some of these tiny houses are set up on like 3-tiered terraces with sets of stone steps, leading to the front porch.
Right.
It wasn't built, like that landscape was not built as part of this development.
Right.
The development was built
on top.
in and among these earthworks, and it's sensitively responding. And if you think about it, man, at the time, 1950, so first of all, even when a lot of these places were being built, like they were, being sold as like a white man's paradise.
Yeah.
On purpose, like in explicitly.
Get out of the city, right?
And get away from the communities you don't want to be around.
Right.
We kicked the other ones out that were around here to make room for you.
Right.
And build a school, which they did actually start to build. There's some infrastructure that was put in.
Okay.
But
they didn't finish it.
They didn't finish
the one at Ham.
The one on Bandy.
Yeah.
But so in this Fort Hale area, what I think is so cool, and I feel like it's something we should be doing. Before then, you didn't build on Confederate earthworks.
Right.
This was like the sacred cow in Richmond.
Right.
These are the authentic monuments to the Confederacy.
Right.
Which, mind you, these ones out here, I would bet dollars to donuts, as Kay used to say, that people who were enslaved by the Greens and other folks around the Higginbottoms at Ravenswood.
They dug the earthworks.
That they were either pressed into service or hired, essentially leased.
Right.
From their enslavers by the Confederacy to build these things.
Yeah.
So it really speaks to like so many levels of connection too.
Right.
And so you didn't build on these things, and you can imagine like the decision to do it and the justification.
Right.
Of like our boys are coming back from war.
Right.
If we were ever gonna to impact this military masterpiece, these earthworks. What better reason than this, to provide safe, comfortable family accommodations for, and I just think it's wonderful, and it's one of those things too. It's profoundly historic. It's obvious when you know what it is, and most of the folks living there have no idea. Yeah, no idea. That's what. I want to
make sure people, if you like Google Ham Cemetery, can you figure out how to get there? Is that the easiest way? What's the best way? Because it really is. Because now there's infrastructure there, and there's signage, and there's a cool pavilion. So like, it's a place that people should go check out. Is that just Google Ham Cemetery Richmond? HAM?
You can Google it. Sons and Daughters of Ham Cemetery. There's a place there's a place marker on Google.
Okay.
If you're physically able and you want the whole experience, I mean, I would suggest parking.
I really think it's worth.
I would suggest parking at Bandy Field and walking through the field.
The woods.
To get there and walk through where the old community was. I mean, when you know that's what this place was. You recognize that this is not a natural green space.
Right.
I mean, that this is, again, a manufactured, domestic residential landscape. Right. And it feels like it when you're out there.
That story kind of opened my eyes to the idea that there are probably lots of similar places in Richmond that you walk past there. The idea of, like, the number of people that throw a ball to their dog in Bandy Field or live right there in the near West End, and it's like, but this is this amazing history. Are there any other, and especially that sort of like hyper-local aspect of it, right? Like, are there any others, like, similar ones that jump out to you in Richmond in the work you've done here? It doesn't have to be a cemetery specifically, but that idea of, I bet people have no idea that X is here and that the history of it is this.
Richmond Hill.
Richmond Hill?
Richmond Hill at 2209 East Gray Street.
Okay.
It's actually like a Christian retreat center. It's a retreat center.
Oh, it's the one that overlooks the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the...
Most people have, been up there without thinking about it. It's a good outlook.
Oh, man, the history's incredible.
Is it?
The history's incredible. And, we're talking about, like, an urban archaeology.
Right.
The fact that... And so, if you've been up there, you've got this massive brick boundary wall privacy wall, really.
Right.
I think it's like 12 feet high.
Right.
That goes around the entire property. There's an amazing mural by Mending Walls.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember that.
That's so if it's
That's
along.
a cool mural.
It's along Franklin Street. It's like above Franklin Street, Taylor's Hill. So if you're on Franklin Street, let's say, and you're looking up at like Franklin and 19th, in that area, and you're looking up
steep
at
hill.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that steep hill. So you can see the terracing on that hill.
Yep.
So it was a falling garden.
Right.
And this was like the rage,
Okay.
the Washingtons did it, and so everybody had to do it.
In the 1700s.
In the 1700s.
Wow.
Yeah. So and Richard Adams, at the time, the richest man in in Richmond for sure.
What's
Personal
the
friend of
17
Tom.
what?
So he acquired the property in the 1790s,
Okay.
I believe, from a guy
So
named John Call.
post-Revolution.
Post-Revolution.
Right.
Post-Revolution, like just after the city of Richmond had become the city of Richmond, right? 1782, the capital was moved here and so on. And he actually, there is like correspondence between him and Jefferson where he's trying to have him put the capital like at Richmond Hill, like at his property.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And at the time, that brick boundary wall wasn't there.
Right.
And so,
Is there interpretation there? Like, if someone goes there, can they learn about it? Or is this sort of like still uninterpreted
you can.
sitting there?
I mean, there's still so much interpretation to do. There's so much to discover. A woman named Pam Smith, who had been the Richmond Hills resident historian, started what they call the Judy Project, which is like the African American History Project at Richmond Hill.
Okay.
She's the one that reached out to me back at the very end of 2019.
Okay.
First time I was there was January 2020.
Right.
And we started doing archaeology there. So if you go there now, inside of it's like a building complex.
Yeah.
So where you would enter sort of into the kind of main sort of office area with the reception desk and so on.
Is it a Catholic church? Who owns it? What's the actual building?
So it's kind of non-denominational.
Okay.
It was purchased by the Episcopalians by Father Ben Campbell.
Okay.
Kind of like a Richmond institution in himself.
Yeah. Totally.
Richmond's Unhealed History is a book that he's really well known for. So he purchased it in like 1985, 85, 86 from the Sisters of the Order of the Visitation of Holy Mary Monte Maria.
Okay, that's what I was. That's a sweet name.
Also just called Monte Maria.
Right.
So when the sisters established a monastery there in 1867, immediately after the war.
Okay.
They were sent down from Baltimore by the diocese to pray for the city, essentially, and assistance to the clergy. Established they call it a monastery. Most people probably think of it as like a convent.
Yeah.
And they also established a school.
Right.
Called Monte Maria Academy. It was a girls' school.
Yeah.
If you go on, say, like Library of Virginia and look at like Virginia Chronicle.
Yeah.
Look at historic newspapers
Yeah,
and you search Monte Maria Academy.
Right.
Tons and tons of stories.
Right.
Great pictures. The sisters actually established a cemetery there.
Okay.
In 1986. In like 1886 or so.
Okay.
Most of the graves were moved in 1985 when they moved to their current monastery convent in Rockville.
Okay.
Which is also an awesome place to visit.
Cool place,
but like you asked, in terms of the interpretation, there's some really great posters.
Okay. Inside the building.
Inside of the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
They give the history of it.
And there is at least one state historical highway marker that's outside.
Right.
Doesn't talk a lot, really, I think, at all about the history that they're really exploring now.
Right.
It was owned by, some of the richest families. The last family to own it were the Elliots, Lofton Elliott. And like if you're a Richmond history nerd, you may have heard of these folks, but...
So, all right, Richmond Hill.
So you said that Shepherd built this?
Sharp. I'm pretty sure it had to be some Sharp family members. So there was,
and you're talking the 1850s?
No. So the first reference, George Sharp, it was called Sharp's Island, and a guy named George Sharp is referenced in a Richmond Dispatch article in 1853.
Yeah.
This is one of the big gaps in knowledge that I'm trying to figure out. There's subsequent articles like in the 1950s that peg this at 1895, built in 1895. It's crazy because there's all these references to this island and the use of this island from like 1853 to the 1870s. Then there's a big gap until the like 1920s, and then there's tons of references after it. So there's this gap in there of like, when we're done, I got to tell you, because I've done some cool, there's that Harry Fenn engraving that I found, but then I also, if you go look on the slave trail marker that's literally right there on your way out, I found that original, there's a print that they use, and it's by this like French painter from the 1820s, and it's of Mayo Bridge going into the city, and there's a little side bridge coming to Sharp's Island, and there's a cabin on Sharp's Island in 1822. So, but like, did the Sharp family own it then? That's 30 years before 1853. And it's like, I'm just like trying to keep going back as far as I can, because eventually you're at 1822, even at 1853, you're less than 100 years from the Harry Bird, you know, the lottery. Remember, like that's how he like parceled out the city. And,
William Bird.
Right, and before William Bird, right, not Harry Bird, different bird.
Yeah.
same machine, different bird, right? Like, anyway, that Manchester wasn't even called it was called like Round Rock.
Rocky Ridge.
Rocky Ridge, that's right, yeah.
There's a really great story too, just in terms of a river story, of these guys that were arrested for piracy, and they would call them inquisitions. They were just hearings, not necessarily inquisition.
Is this on the James?
This is in Rocky Ridge in Manchester.
No.
Yeah, on the James. Yeah, and so it's a great story.
Arrested for piracy.
Arrested for piracy. And so they're being held, I guess, in some building over there.
What year is this?
This is early 1800s. Okay. This is pre-Civil War.
Okay.
And I came across this when I was, trying to help with signage for James River Association for the Buzzard Center there. Yeah, and so anyway, these guys like arrested for piracy. They're put on trial, and then they're basically they're stowed away, right? The piratey term.
Right.
They jump out of the window into the James River. One dude gets captured, the other guy swims across the James, and you can imagine him too, because like at the time, rockets, like proper rockets, which is basically between the mouth of Shockoe Creek and Gillies Creek.
Right.
This is like the main port.
Yeah.
So there's massive ocean-going ships, big wooden ship sails, the horse. Yeah. This dude like how piratey, like jumps out of this window, swims across the river to escape, the authorities, and you can like imagine him like hanging on to mooring, like hiding in the water, and he escapes. He never heard from him again.
Never heard from him again.
Went amazing. And found his buried treasure somewhere.
Well, yeah. So
so I love that story.
I mean, that's what I can't get enough of those stories, and this island is crazy for that reason. There's so many similar stories. Like there's stories of murder, literally. There's stories of, George Sharp, the original Sharp, blowing his hand off like in a drunken party with his boys. Like there's all these cool stories. And I brought you out here, I guess it was in the fall or winter, to help me sort of interpret some of the surface features. And what was amazing, we talked about this a little bit, was sort of how you start seeing the landscape differently. And, look around, right? Like this is obvious. There was a house. This is the foundation of a 2-story like real house that was built here in 1895. But then we come over here, walk this way. It's like, you really opened my eyes to the idea that, they quarried, that rock isn't supposed to look like this. There's some of these like holes in the rock here if you want to like get a look. Like if you look down this line, like that's not a natural erosion pattern.
Well, we were looking at one like actually out in the river with lead-headed iron spikes still stuck in there.
Yes, still stuck, and you see them on the way over. Some of those were for what? Like fish traps, slat traps.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that. But you look down the line here, and this is where they quarried granite. So then you do research.
I mean, I love these smoking guns, man. Drill.
Right, look at that drill hole.
It's awesome.
So, I go down a million rabbit holes with Sharp's Island. Like, if I could solve any mysteries in Richmond after, like, being out here, it's, all right, where did Newport and Smith plant the wooden cross? Like, where exactly, right? Like, I love Newport and Smith. It makes me, they were like Butch and Sundance coming up the river, and they're like, all right, we can't go any farther. It's like 12 days after Jamestown, right?
Yeah.
When they come up river, and like, there's a statue of the cross downtown, but nobody knows exactly where. So that one, and I want to know exactly where Abe and Tad put their feet when they, like, what was it, 4 days after the fall of Richmond, when Abe Lincoln and his son come up.
So you know what? That's actually
that's
actually really interesting. That's really interesting. So when I was doing the rockets research for James River Association,
right.
Like the story is that Yeah, Abe Lincoln shows up
Right.
like the day after, the fall of Richmond.
Right.
If everything's still smoky and sparky from all the fires that were set, and the like traditional wisdom is that he disembarked at Rockets.
Right.
Not like what people think Rockets landing now, like down by
the development. Right.
Right, which used to that
it's
area,
upstream of that, right?
It's upstream. I mean, it's upstream and around the bend. It was at the very bottom of what we consider the city right now, like on the James. But I was finding references that he didn't disembark at Rockets, that he went a bit farther upstream, probably to like avoid the crowds when he's just trying to get off the boat.
Right.
I mean, you've seen like the paintings and engravings of people just going crazy for him, the great emancipator.
Yeah, to that end, like I have this like sort of semi-joking, like I want to get a sign and put it out here. Like there's no evidence to suggest that Christopher Newport and John Smith didn't plant the cross right here. Like look, I'm just saying Tad and Abe might have had a sandwich here before they went in town to see, you know what I mean? Like I love, because it's obviously been, any evidence would have been washed away long ago.
It's not even crazy though. I mean, in the sense of like speculation is so important.
Right.
I mean, that's how we're gonna like get our questions and figure out methods for trying to gain answers to those questions. But it's like, look at this place, man.
Right.
Look at this city. Look at the river. It's beautiful.
Right.
Like if you were showing up here from, the smoky back rooms of government in the nation's capital or what have you, or just after even touring like the carnage of battlefields.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't you soak this up and look around?
Right.
It's like William Byrd talking about being on Belle Isle. William Byrd, that's one of my mysteries. Where was William Byrd's house on Belle Isle? That would be one of the things we were looking for,
Yeah.
And him in his diaries, talking about the sound of the river and how everything else is drowned out. All the sounds of the city. And I mean, think about like even just the noise of, hundreds or thousands of horse hooves and wheels on cobblestone streets.
Right, and all the blacksmithing.
All the mills going, as massive 5-6 story, mills and everything like that. The ships and so on, just the ruckus in general.
So those are my.
So you gotta look around.
that's one of your like bucket list mysteries. Like if well, I have two questions. If resources were unlimited, like where would you dig in Richmond? I mean, I've got $10 million to spend. Like, what mystery are you solving? Are you trying to solve?
Oh man.
In the Richmond area.
I mentioned Richmond Hill, and I would definitely do a lot more work there.
Okay.
I think I gotta say this is really sort of a weird answer to this. I think, but I think one of the mysteries for me in Richmond is why the city doesn't care more about preserving the historic cultural landscape.
Okay.
And about the archaeology.
But like, which one would you preserve?
God, I mean, if I had $10 million, I could preserve a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay, but you gotta do one.
Oh man, I gotta do one. I'd probably go back out there to, I'd be out at Sons and Daughters of Ham Cemetery in Bandy Field.
Okay.
I'd love to see some interpretation of that, like entire landscape. Like we focus so much on the cemeteries. Case was talking about
East End and Evergreen.
We talk about the cemeteries, and it's like, well, what about the living communities, the communities that are living, that created these places, maintain these places, created like that cultural land. This is the circulation within this. I'd love to kind of authentically bring that stuff back, particularly in the green spaces. I mean, because we're talking about archaeology.
Right.
Down in Chaco Bottom. I mean, urban archaeology in general. You know what I would do though with $10 million is I'd build a grocery store. Just saying. just saying. That's
so
what I would
you're not allowed to build a grocery store. That's
just
you got to
not
start
feasible.
digging, and you got to solve a mystery.
But I mean, look around. So I've been doing a little bit of a guerrilla archaeology, and I might not even should say this, but
But maybe.
On the Sundays I may pass by from the public right of way, of course. A lot of these, because I'm living on the south side. And you got these really large multifamily housing constructions going up, Lego blocks going up all over the place, and they're clearing land. They're removing parking lots and so on. Man, the amount of archaeology, I'm talking features and artifacts that are exposed on these sites before they construct these. Like take for example, right over here at Commerce Street between Hull and Decatur.
Right.
I live like a couple blocks from there, between Hull and Decatur on 12th. Right, and I've taken a walk one day. I was like, I need to like take walks.
Get out.
That's what I need to do, like when I'm taking a break. Take walks and stop complaining.
Right.
You can pet the cat later. Right. And so I started walking around, and like of course I can't help myself.
Right.
I'm drawn to exposed earth, you know. And as I'm walking by, and I'd taken a lot of pictures and videos of this stuff that I lost because my phone had, it's a long story with that.
Yeah.
To talk about archaeological monitoring, right? Because in looking at these exposed, you know, construction sites, brick building foundations, and old stuff.
Right.
I mean, historically old stuff.
Right.
You know, 17th century culture material, 18th century culture material, 1700 stuff. And it's like, whoa, look at all this stuff preserved here. This is incredible.
Right.
You know, that's the thing about archaeology, man. 90% of the time, it's not about preservation in place.
Right.
Like, we're not all talking about cemeteries and burial mounds and things like that.
I guess.
I mean, even still, it's like, you know, progress needs to happen. Like, people need places to live. We need to build grocery stores. You know, we need public transit.
Everything
and
can't
circulation.
be a museum in a hallowed ground, sacred site.
Exactly, but it's like, I think most archaeologists, what we're really asking is, well, shoot, let us have a look at this stuff before you just, you know, chuck it off to the dump.
Let's tell the story first.
Let's tell the story. Like, I feel like it would go so far. I mean, even if, honestly, there had been a collection of material from over there. So the reason I bring up that spot at Commerce in Decatur, that's where the Beatty family lived and had several stores. The Beatty block, and if you're looking up, unlike an archaeologist, if you're looking up as you're going down Hull Street, like you're headed, you know, away from the city, on the 1100 block, there's what's called the Beatty block. Big brick building, 1888. It was the first, you know, big commercial building built
in the Manchester area.
In Manchester. It's significant. Obviously, it's a significant contributing resource as far as the National Register is concerned to the historic district. But it's like, dude, here's this cool building, and this is where these folks lived. And you talk about stories of murder and intrigue, chock-a-block, pun intended. And it's like, man, how cool would it be to not just tell the story? Because first of all, you know how I learned about this? I found these freaking artifacts, right? And then I just happened to be perusing, because this is what a nerd I am, I happened to be perusing old city directories from like the late 1800s.
That's nerdy stuff.
I'm like, wait a minute, the Beatty, is that the Beatty of the same Beatty? Sure enough is. I mean, if you search Beatty family Manchester history, you know, talk about the drama. And it's like, rather than just tell the stories, leverage the material culture of archaeology, leverage that tangible component, even if you can't touch it. I hate to say this, but like, put it in a shadow box just to illustrate the tale and give people a sense of place, ground them as to where they are. You got folks moving here from all over the country. Presumably, that's what's fueling this crisis.
That was my point about ham and how many other ham type places there are, and places that those stories will never get told. And that's why I love like showcasing this island. You know what I mean? Because there's so many cool stories out here. I mean, I don't know if I told you about this, but there's a 1922, it was huge in the paper. There was like multiple governors, like multiple former, did I tell you about this? There was a pageant regatta that took place on the James, and they recreated the Christopher Newport, John Smith, like the idea of them coming up the James and landing. And thousands of people lined up on the Mayo Bridge, which actually 1922, it might have been like the very beginning. I'm trying to remember when this Mayo Bridge, it's right around then. But whatever the Mayo Bridge was at the time, thousands of people lined up, and they planted the cross on Sharp's Island, and they had guys, you know, like pantomiming, because obviously they couldn't hear them on Mayo Bridge, but like, so this is, I could show you the newspaper articles about it, but it was like a big deal, because it was the, you know, however many year anniversary, and they used to do this.
Do you know out here where they planted the cross during
it would have had to have been on the downstream tip, because, you know, everyone on Mayo Bridge is going to want to see it.
Are there photos or anything?
No, it's all... no, it's just references. 1922. So, I mean, there could have been photos, but there weren't that I saw. And I'll show you the articles, or I'll send them to you. But it's like, that's absurd that happened here. You know, like literally thousands of people lining it and using the island as the place to like showcase that story.
I mean, you know, talking about like progress, I think it speaks to also just movement. I think we're talking about progress, talking about like kind of movement through time and new creations and demolitions and so on. But it's like, you know, you can feel the movement just being here. I mean, standing here feels like you're on an aircraft carrier, and it almost looks like it too. It's just absolute, you know, granite. But, you know, the river's constantly moving. The sound of it is moving. All these the crazy number of herons out today.
Human endeavors are constantly changing.
The train, you know, trestle right here. I mean, and all the bridges. And I think that's one of the beauties of looking at these historic landscapes too. It's like anything you start to get obsessed with, it becomes this jumping off point that in a city like Richmond, it can just literally take you everywhere in the city.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
how many of these rocky islands with these quarries, you know, these quarry marks and stuff are on here? And I feel like if you're a paddler, I mean, and you stop off or you get on to Hip Camper and you come and check the place out, and you're seeing these things. Come on, I've seen these everywhere. You know, just like the pilaster I was talking about. You know, just like any of this stuff. Just like the terracing.
Don't take it for granted, right? Like,
hey.
To me, it's like, oh, right. I didn't even mean to do it. Wait, did I?
Intend your puns.
Intended, right? Yeah, but like, don't take it for granted that there's an obvious like drill mark there. How many people ever see that?
Well, keep an eye out
There's
too.
a reason.
And you know
So
that.
what were they doing here?
And that's what's so wild, right? Is like this. You know, this is we would call this an archaeological feature.
Right.
Like it's not an artifact.
Right.
You can't pick this up and move it away.
But it's a feature.
It's clear, discrete evidence of human behavior, specific human behavior.
Right.
Like you mentioned, you know, the slat traps for fish.
Right.
I mean, if you're, you know, over hanging out at Belle Isle,
Right.
particularly on the south,
the dry rock side.
the dry rock side,
Yeah.
I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of these things. You're like with a little bit of that 10 million that you're gonna grant me. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I mean, I'd love to get, you know, some students out there and let's take let's put a total station out, or let's get a, you know, sub-meter GPS and let's just map in. You know, let's follow up on Trout's handwork.
Right.
I mean, well, let's just map in all the holes.
Yeah.
And then start connecting the dots.
Trying to figure out what they were doing there.
Dude, that's some fun archaeology.
That's some fun.
You know, how many traps were out here? And, you know, when you start getting into it, it's like, man, we could be taking molds of these things.
Right.
And even, I don't know, replicating the bits or you know,
right.
we could talk about the change through time. Or do you have different companies coming out here?
Right.
A lot of the folks, a lot of the guys, the men that were at living in Bandy,
right.
you know, many of whom, of course, were probably buried at Sons and Daughters of Ham Cemetery, are showing up in the late 1800s and early 20th century as quarrymen.
Oh, interesting.
And people have asked me, like, well, what quarry were they working at? And I'm like, man, probably wherever the company told them to go.
Right.
You know, did they come
so
down to
much
Belle Isle?
quarrying on the
Definitely.
south bank of the river. Yeah.
You know, I mean, were they out here? Were folks
Right.
from with the, you know,
Yes.
the Holmes brothers or the Bradford brothers, or
That's cool.
you know, were they out here on Sharps?
All right. That was awesome. I'm going to give you a couple final questions, some fun ones that we try and do with everybody.
Right on.
I'm still like hashing this out, but the one I like to ask is, all right, so you were marooned on Sharps Island for, let's say, a week.
All right.
You got to pick 3 people and a sandwich. But one of the people has to be a celebrity.
Oh man.
Don't forget the sandwich.
Oh gosh, I should have got more sleep. I've been so isolated. They're celebrities.
Are you a peanut butter and jelly guy? A ham?
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
go.
That's
You're
funny.
welcome.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I've been living a mostly vegetarian lifestyle of late. Man, I'd probably just I'd breach that into the world of pescatarian if I was out here.
Yes.
I'd probably just bring the fixins for a sandwich and try to catch me one of these stripers.
some fish
dude.
tacos
Oh
or
my
something.
gosh, the sweetness of a sea
Yeah,
bass.
dude, trust me, it would not take long to catch a striper right now.
100%. 100%.
That's smart. All right, so you got your lunch. Who's out here with you?
Who's out here? I'd probably want to invite my buddy Brendan Burke,
Okay.
state underwater archaeologist.
State underwater. Yeah, he's been out here.
He's been out here.
He can tell you some cool things.
Absolute fount of knowledge.
Right.
Knows how to process animals and so on. He's got a farm out in Big Farm Glendale out
Yeah,
in
he can
Amelia
clean the
County.
fish for you, probably pretty quick.
Yeah, because I'm the host.
Right.
Right.
You don't want to get your hands dirty.
No,
right?
exactly. I got to be shaking hands and whatnot.
Are you going to be out here a week? Who else?
Oh, a week.
Yeah, you're marooned.
Oh,
It's like a New Yorker cartoon.
Oh shoot. Gosh, I gotta make more friends
The last guy.
that would actually want to spend a week with me on an island.
Yeah, I mean they don't have to want to. You've marooned them with
Marooned.
you. Yeah, you can go dead too. You know, you want to bring Jimi Hendrix out here, give a concert. You can bring whatever.
Man, I'd probably want to bring Moses Bradford out here.
Okay. Ham Cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to bend his ear,
Right.
in the sense, or pick his brain,
Right.
as to just how did all that happen over there?
Yeah.
And also to bring him out here too on the river. Say, hey, we're not working, we're not quarrying anything. Let's soak this up. Rather than being in the landlocked former plantation.
He'd probably
Confederate
appreciate our
defensive surroundings.
sculpture here. That was Keith Ramsey's ode to the working man taking a break working in Manchester.
Yes.
Coming out here and, wetting a line.
Dude, Keith Ramsey, man, awesome
He's the
local
best.
artist.
I got to get him out here for sure.
I think it was you was telling me his dad was like a found materials artist as well.
No, not his dad. His sort of inspiration is a guy named Melvin Edwards. That's the name of the statue is Edwards. And it was a kind of like that guy was his inspiration. He's like the super well-known, honored black artist who is like, found object sculpture was his thing.
I'm racking my brain for a celebrity here.
Hey, come on, man.
You know what? How about Joaquin Phoenix, man?
Ooh,
Joaquin Phoenix, just because he's such a nut. And I think what would be so fun is that like these stories that we're telling out here.
Yeah.
I mean, what an opportunity to like put yourself into the mind, because such a committed method actor. To like put we were talking about how hard it is to get into like the psychology of, ancient peoples or even not so ancient, dead folks. Like the context isn't there.
Yeah.
But it's like, man, with my nerdy archival references and just like the feeling of the space and the feeling that you're steeped in history. Like even despite the sort of souring in a bit of some of the view shed with
just
these
modernity
buildings,
encroaching, right?
The sun goes down.
Right.
But I think that could make it really fun or scary.
Right.
But fun and scary don't have to be on separate sides of the coin.
That's quite a group you got out here. I like it. That's good stuff.
Okay, well.
But I mean, you will have some sweet fish tacos.
No doubt.
Right?
No doubt.
All right, man.
Keep spirits up.
That was fun.
Thanks, Andy.
That was great.
Oh, beautiful place.
Man, what a day, y'all.
Yeah.